I wasn't going to get into politics on this channel. In fact, I don't know if I'm going to. I'm not really planning to expand this channel at all. But I just something that's been just really annoying me for some time is this Mueller report. I mean, it's got to be one of the biggest crocs of bull in the history of the U.S. and the history of almost any country. I mean, it's just absolutely ludicrous. Now, those of you who think that I'm a Republican, Democrat hater, well, I was basically a centralist. However, since the Trump election, I have been just absolutely disgusted with the behavior of the Democrats. I have never seen such childish, poor losing. Now, there's a lot of legitimate criticisms I have for the Republican Party and Donald Trump. The Republican Party often has been a party of greed, religious hypocrisy, warmongering, and it's a lot of their anti-environmental rhetoric. Yes, a lot of times it's ridiculous. But if you look at the track record of the Democrats, they are probably no better, maybe even worse than Republicans on those same issues. They just like to spew lies about how. And one of their lies, that's another thing that really bothers me, is they're constantly accusing Republicans, especially white male Republicans, of being racist. I mean, it's like a broken record. It's like they know most people won't think for themselves, and so if they just hear, Republicans are racist, Republicans are racist, Republicans are racist, a large percentage of the public who doesn't think for themselves, they don't do their own research, is going to just automatically believe it like hypnosis. Okay, and they know that, so they know they can just, when in fact it was the Democratic Party that ran the slave trade. You think I'm kidding? Look it up. Until, I think, Reagan in office, almost all Southern politicians were Democrats. Almost all of them. So, I mean, the South was all Democrat. And they fought to keep it going. They fought to keep slavery going. And they were responsible for the Jim Crow laws. And it was Republicans who fought to end slavery and eventually won. And I've heard black people especially say, well, he just did that for political reasons. Like, I can't acknowledge that any white male, especially a Republican, could possibly ever do any favors for a black man, So there had to be some other excuse for why Lincoln freed the slaves. Couldn't have been because he was a nice guy. Absolutely not. All white males are racist, and especially if they're Republicans. And I'm tired of hearing that crap. Like this recently, there's this Baltimore thing going on about, they're complaining about the border. The border crisis is terrible. But it's not just the Republicans that are responsible for this border crisis. There's this mass influx of Hispanic people racing and flooding across the border. Having that many homeless people in one place is very difficult to take care of, to house and feed and clothe all these people in a mass all at once. So that's why there is a lot of terrible conditions and overcrowding down there. And of course, the Democrats want to blame it all on Trump. There are legitimate complaints you can have against Donald Trump. Okay, his Twitter tantrums are often very childish, and the leader of a country should not be talking the way he is often talking. Although some of the things he says, I agree with. I mean, sometimes these politicians are too politically correct, they're too diplomatic, and Trump's basically giving people a good swift kick in the butt where they need it. Although sometimes he goes overboard and is insulting people and stuff is going way out of line. But this thing with this Baltimore governor, I mean, Trump said, you're criticizing the border, your district is worse than the border. Well, I don't know if it's worse than the border, but it is pretty bad. And Trump was saying, I want an investigation, all the money, they're sending all kinds of money to Baltimore, and yet you got the highest percentage of murders per capita, second highest after St. Louis. It's just horrific. So, but because Trump is white and he's criticizing a black man, he's automatically labeled a racist. It's fair game. It's fair game to criticize the white man or anything, but it's politically incorrect. It's racism for a white person to criticize a non-white person or a woman. You know, you can't criticize blacks, Hispanics, Asians, women, and you definitely can't criticize Jews. No matter how warranted the criticism is against any of these, you can't do it. You're a racist. Women, if a man criticizes a woman, he's a misogynist, and they got another little term that they invented. They have all these little terms, anti-Semite. You know, it used to be male chauvinist pig. Now it's misogynist, and it's all directed against the white male. Okay, there's no little term if you insult the white male. If you can bash them, you can slander the hell out of them. Just the fact that all white males are called racist, that is racism, okay? That is racist. That's prejudice. Prejudice means to prejudge. You've already decided because this man has white skin and he's got a penis and he happens to be conservative, you already have labeled him a racist. You don't even know anything about him. That's prejudice, to prejudge, okay? It's racism because you've already singled him out. You've already come up with an insult and slander against him based on his race and his gender. And this goes on constantly. The media constantly, the Democrats constantly spew this. Racist, he's a racist. You know, and I'm sick and tired of it. It's disgusting. Anyway, getting back to this Mueller probe, which is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. Now, like I said, there are legitimate things you can say about Trump. He's that possibly there are things that could be legitimately impeached over. He attacked Syria twice without congressional support. This was an emotional reaction. It's like the kind of thing, you know, if somebody steps on your foot, you punch them. You can't have a man in the White House who has access to nuclear weapons with that type of mentality. Okay, that's an extreme abuse of his power. Now, that possibly something that he could be impeached for, and yet from the left, I don't hear any complaints, not the slightest, tiniest thing about it. Partially it's because there's the Jewish angle, and you're not allowed to criticize Jews. You're not allowed to say that there are Jews who would love us to go to war with Iran and Syria and fight Israel's wars for them, and they would love that if we send our soldiers over there to die and waste our money so they can feel more comfortable, because rather than trying to use diplomacy and get along with their neighbors, they want to exterminate or control their neighbors. But you're not allowed to say that because you can't criticize Jews. Well, I'm sorry. You call me an anti-Semite. They're not even really Semitic anymore. The word Semite comes from the word Shemite, which means basically white race. The Jews, the Hebrews initially were Shemites, but that was about 3,000 plus years ago. Now they've been taken over by the Canaanites, the very people they were supposed to wipe out. A lot of people criticize the Bible for that, criticize God. I used to think, well, guys, God's so cruel, He wants to wipe out all these people. Because these Canaanites, they are of a race of psychopathic mass murderers, and the only way you can deal with mass murderers is to kill them. And you can't let them reproduce and produce more of their own kind. So, but it's too late now. They're ingrained, and you can't do anything. They're not just within the Jewish population, they're all over the place. The weeds have spread through the whole garden, so the only thing you do is just burn the whole garden and start over again, which maybe that's what's going to happen one of these days, I don't know. But getting back to the Mueller report. Okay, it's absolutely ludicrous. It's ridiculous. I knew from day one that this was nonsense. It's all about the Democrats couldn't handle the fact that their candidate lost. I mean, I've never seen such childish, spoiled sport, poor losers in my entire life. I mean, even Little League teams, when they lose, I don't see such childish behavior. And that's what it's all about. It's all about the Democrats couldn't handle the fact that their candidate lost. They just started crying and whining like a bunch of little babies. And that's what it's all about. It's 100% what it is. And getting back to Hillary, I mean, Hillary wasn't fit to be president, even if you wanted to completely ignore her extensive criminal background. But, you know, the reason she's not in prison or been executed for crimes against humanity, treason, you name it, she's done it. The reason she hasn't been executed or imprisoned is because she's part of the despot class, these satanic Masons, these oligarchies that secretly run everything from behind the scenes. There's people who are above the law. And that's why she has never been prosecuted. But even if you want to ignore all her criminal background, she wasn't physically, mentally, emotionally fit to be in the White House. That's a very stressful job. On the campaign trail, she's passing out. She's got Google eyes. Her eyes are going. It means that she's got some kind of serious brain damage of some type. You know, she's not fit to be president, mentally and emotionally, even if you want to ignore her criminal past. You know, that's not to say that Trump is a rose either, but, you know, at least Trump was physically and mentally fit for the job, even though I consider his emotional reactionaryism extreme. But anyway, getting back to the Mueller report again. I looked into it. I decided to actually look into it. On face value, I figured this had to be just complete BS. But I decided to look into it a little bit. And I looked into one of these 12 people that Mueller indicted. It's absolute bullshit. It's a joke. Vladimir Putin laughs every time this is brought up. He indicted these 12 Russians. First of all, his indictment is useless because he can't indict people in Russia, okay? He has to go through proper diplomatic channels, which is what Vladimir Putin says. If you have a complaint against these people, you go to the Russian government. They don't have an extradition treaty exactly, but they do have a treaty, and Russia says that, you know, they will go and investigate. If they see it's warranted, they will investigate. Putin said he's never been approached by anyone in America through the proper diplomatic channels. This indictment is meaningless. One of the people that he indicted, I just looked into one of them. There was no reason to look into any because the first one was so ridiculous. This guy named Guccifer2. He had a website called Guccifer2. Okay, he had like a few thousand views. Most of them weren't even Americans. There was no possible way you could have had any significant effect on the U.S. elections. And here's the kicker. The guy's not even Russian. He's Romanian, using a Russian proxy. And this is part of the evidence that Mueller had in one of the indictments, which is, like I said, it's completely useless. I mean, these indictments are good for toilet paper and nothing else. They wouldn't even make good toilet paper. They're too rough. So the whole thing, it's one of the most ridiculous, off-the-wall, complete, total BS things in the entire history of this country. Not even a small town would pull a shenanigan this stupid. And yet, these Democrats will go to their dying day when, you know, Trump is in bed with Putin, Trump's in bed with Putin. In fact, the tensions between Russia and the U.S. right now are about as high as they've ever been. Since possibly the Cuban Missile Crisis, maybe even worse. And we've actually had even a little bit of a hot war because there have been planes that have been downed and intercepted on both sides. And, you know, yet the Democrats still go on and on and on about Trump's in bed with Putin, Trump's in bed with Putin. You know, they make up their own reality in their own mind, and that becomes their reality. Anyway, I'm going to be going over if I haven't already, so that's all I wanted to say on this.